Hello! Welcome back to Encaught and welcome back to another film industry interview. Today we're discussing the movie Companion, and for that we're being joined by prosthetic makeup designer Jeremy Selenfriend and makeup effects shop supervisor Brian Spears. Jeremy and Brian work on Companion together, but they've been in a plethora of other productions, such as the new TV series Goosebumps, Smile 2, Smile 1, American Horror Story, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, The Equalizer, In the Heights, and many other productions. Before we go on to the interview, please make sure to like and subscribe so you can get more content like this for interviews with people that work on your favorite movies. And without further ado, Brian and Jeremy.
I'm Jeremy Selenfriend, Brian Spears, longtime collaborators. Um, my shop is Monster in My Closet. Name of your shop?
I choose my name.
All right, that's Brian Spears. We did the prosthetic makeup effects for Companion, with the singular exception of the amazing robot hand at the end, which was all the differences at Legacy Effects. They did Terminator, so it's kind of their specialty. So they came in to handle the robot puppet, and thank God, because it was amazing. But yeah, we have a long storied career and resume between us, like 40 plus years in the business. So yeah.
I mean, my name is Brian Spears, and I got my for companion. Pretty much looked over the shop. I didn't go to set very much for that project, but at the same time, we had companion. We had some other projects, so we were juggling some stuff.
Yeah, we had about four going on at that time.
But I love movies, and I was always scared of scary movies until I realized someone made scary things. And then I discovered a magazine called Fangoria, and it was kind of that led me into where I'm at today. Basically, just loved hearing how movies were made and realizing that there was a position where you could be ultra creative and kind of wow people. And back in my day when I was much younger, it was these makeup artists were rock stars. They were magicians. So like it was all a lot more practical. It was very hands on, and it was never at least my guidance counselor told me it was never a career.
Yeah, mine said the same. There's no future in the art was the exact sentence that was etched into my brain at 17 years old.
So that kind of made it cooler. Now it is a legit job, and people go to school for what we do, and it was I went to a college that had classes in what I do now.
Yeah, we went to the same school, not at the same time. There was, I think, a decade between us. But yeah, we went to the same school, the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, which no longer exists, but a lot of working professionals in the industry came out of there.
And it was one of those things where it was like you would take two classes, like a semester, I guess, that were in what you would call makeup effects now.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of like, hey, that was all that was offered. So that was like the cool thing. Like it was still now again, there's schools just based on what we do. There's online classes. There's online, like the world's out there. Everyone does it.
I mean, our program was literally undergrad. We were in the basement shops. Like it was great. We were still, it was still this like not quite secret little club of amazing artists that just all have this one passion.
Also, like the thing is, knowledge is a lot more attainable now with the internet. Also, people are willing to give away secrets. Back in the day, it was really just Dick Smith, who was like the godfather of our industry, that would kind of disseminate information, and he'd give it to you, all of it. Whereas some people would take that information and not share it. So now it's a much, there's a lot.
There's a lot more resources to learn from now, which is good. But there, it comes with the pitfalls as well.
I'm very curious. So obviously there's a big market in Los Angeles for SFX, but I've noticed that a lot of makeup artists and SFX artists and set designers and customers come from New York or are based in New York. Is there a reasoning behind that?
Yeah, New York has a vast film industry that has grown and grown and grown over the last 25 years.
Yeah, but even that's all right. So, like when I was making independent or working on a lot of independent movies, I always wanted to stay in New York.
Yeah,
my
same.
attitude is I also figured everyone that was the only place to go was L.A. In New York at the time when I was growing up, it was like two shows, SNL and
Law and Order.
Law and Order,
and Broadway.
So, you know, and that was basically like a show would come in and out, but those were the only shows that would have a lot of heavier makeup effects.
They would come in, they would shoot a week or two to get their New York exteriors, and then they would go back to their studios in Los Angeles. And then New York, as a entity, was kind of like, why are we doing that? Like, let's make this a better house for incoming productions, and starting with studio in Astoria in Queens. You had Sesame Street, and a bunch of shows grew out of there, and it just became a much more desirable full-time location. To the point that in the past couple of years, there's been more productions here than the past 20 years, I would say, more productions here than in LA. We want everyone to work, but it's certainly nice to have all of that here on the East Coast.
But it also, like at the time, when you first get started, we're not working on these big projects. So I was doing, when you're doing smaller movies, it just seemed like, hey, I'm a bigger fish in a smaller pond type of thing by, sticking with New York. But even like I don't live in New York City proper. So I lived in the suburbs. So even going to New York City seemed otherworldly to me. And to this day, I hate just simply because of parking. But it was one of I worked more in the Woodstock area than I ever did in Manhattan. So like it was that type of thing where I just found smaller movies and it you would build up. Yeah. So there was once you get a house, you're not moving, that type of thing. So I was never drawn to LA, but yeah, that's where Hollywood is. That you see that sign, that's where you're going. Yeah. So I understand that. But even you guys being from Boston,
Boston has its own film industry. Yeah.
Yeah. So
you guys just hosted Walking Dead last year, so
there's a ton of avenues where like it's not just LA now, and it worked out that we were in New York or New Jersey, and we could, again, none of my dreams were real when I was growing up, when I was younger. Like everything kind of grew with me, so that was a good thing.
Yeah, same. The film industry kind of grew around us as we were coming up, going from indies to studio and beyond.
So when you first get hired onto a project, what are the first steps or tasks you want to accomplish?
I mean, being hired, it's not done in such a cut and dry way. I could say I've been being hired for 5 months on our current show. Like we've been chatting and talking and sending designs and doing R&D since November, and I am still not, they're not talking to any other studios or any other shops, but like I don't have my contract in place yet, and it's 4 months since our first conversation. So it's a long road from like, hey, we're doing a movie to we are now starting that movie. Sometimes frustratingly long, sometimes it's the opposite, where you get your call and the next week you're building. So there's very little consistency in that answer. Each project is kind of its own journey, but
it's all based on the script.
Yeah, that's where any of it starts. Yeah.
Everyone says so. Either it doesn't matter the budget; it matters when you read that script. Like you could have 12 producers, or you could have one guy that you talk to. Mm-hmm. Like it's all like so. And usually you'll then meet a director. Usually the smaller the budget, you'll have more FaceTime with your director. The bigger it is, you got to schedule meetings. It gets a little, you're more one of the cogs in the system that helps the director. And again, you have FaceTime, but there are certain times, like you have to schedule meetings.
Yeah.
But it all starts with a script, and then your basic, sometimes you're designing it. Sometimes somebody's giving you artwork to look at. It all depends on the project.
The larger the studio show, generally, or movies, I should say, studio movies, even as early as we're often hired, there is concept art that the movie was pitched on. Sometimes that's coming to us from when we get our first call, saying like, hey, we're doing this show. Here's some images we're working with. And it goes from there. And then, our artistic minds can kind of take those images and transfer it into what's actually tangible and practical reality.
Like when we did Companion.
That one had no concept art.
There was no concept art. There was talk of the hand.
Yeah.
Like we were building things that might go in conjunction with the hand before we even knew what the hand looked
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
So there were certain things like, oh, we can only take it this far, or we know you need this. Like here's an element that we can use with you, but we can't. We needed to know certain things first. So that's all we like. Especially the bigger the movie, the more you interact. I remember when we did the sequel for Smile, we had to wait forever to get a microphone.
Yeah,
because it was a very specific microphone.
So we couldn't build our gag without it. And key moment of the movie, we're waiting for this very fantastical prop to be finished and designed so we could build our element. So it's all very collaborative. And even though we knew for months what we were making, how we were making it, we still couldn't pull the trigger in our department until two other departments got their pieces done and signed off and everything like that.
And like another movie we'll probably do in the future, it all hinges on who they cast.
Yeah.
So if they don't cast, we need them. Here's a date that we're comfortable working with. So it's all those things. It's you're putting together a giant puzzle.
Yep. All
and
at the
like
same
moving
time.
Things around. Like you're just one part of that.
Yeah. You have 30 different people putting together that puzzle all at once, scrambling for their pieces and trying to make it all fit together.
And we all think we have a more important job.
Organized chaos with
right.
Top professionals in every facet.
We had a conversation with a companion producer, Jamie Buckner, last week, and he was mentioning how there was this a period of time that you had to stop filming because of the actress strike. Did that affect your guys's
totally
procedures
to shot right by my house, and I would have done more days in the original schedule. And then by the time they moved it, we were on other jobs, so it left me in the shop. Like, I would have.
Yeah, we had 4 shows going at once, and 3 of the 4 shut down with the writer's strike. No, 2 of the 4 shut down with the writer's strike. 2, Companion and American Horror Story, were able to continue going because the scripts were written. So those kept on going until the actors' strike. But then when everything picked back up 5 months later, it all picked back up at once. So it was, the strike ended late on a Thursday night. The next morning on Friday, I got one by one all 4, producers and UPMs from each of those shows being like, hey, here's our new start date. Here's this, here's that. Companion, we thankfully had, I think, like 3 weeks before they were ramped back up and ready to film.
And that was only probably because of actors, in a sense, weren't ready to come back. Like they had other things too, so that worked to our advantage. But I mean,
we were in another season. Like we started shooting that movie in spring, and we were now late autumn. So like, I mean, there was a tremendous amount of money in post production to even out the visuals. Rebuilding trees and things like that. So there was this all these things that were not budgeted for originally in that film had to be taken care of.
But again, also like to understand our like little world, like we do take other jobs in the sense like there's always 1 or 2 that are the main jobs, but we're not on set every day like as our like in these worlds like some of these movies. So I remember like, and we're not snobs when it comes. We did a short film during Smile too, just because we're helping someone else out and getting something done. So like instead of going to that set, I was going to Long Island to shoot the short because we're also not going to like screw over someone else.
Yeah,
like we said yes to that job during a slow time, and like that fit into our like the non-strike schedule. It was a little, but we saw it. Then once everything got going, that's where like everything started at one time.
But like we also always want to stay with independent stuff. Like studio stuff is great and it's wonderful and it's what we dreamed of as a kid. But indie stuff is where our hearts are, and there's often far more creativity involved and things like that. Studio system, you have, even if you and your director are on the exact same page and have the best ideas that you both absolutely want to pull off, you have tier after tier after tier of producers and studios that have their own say. And sometimes it works out beautifully. Other times it's, well, you can't do that. That's not going to work. That's not going to test well. That's not this. That's not that. So you have those other elements that factor in that just don't on smaller movies and independent movies. Companion with Drew Hancock was certainly open to everything we pitched him and just kind of geeked out over all our makeup tests and everything. Like he was very excited the whole way. Great to work.
Kind of going into Companion a little bit more. Obviously, the main major thing that people I think remember from the trailer even is the arm. But I know you guys didn't work on it specifically.
No,
What
that one we
else
did. The arm on
guys
fire.
do?
Her
Arm on
burning arm was all off. Yeah, no, just after she peels all the skin off, and you see the functional robot hand, which was 100% practical on set. That was Legacy. Everything else was our world. So yeah,
Okay, so then
her burning her arm over the candle was us. Her spending half the movie with all burnt up was us. The officer that gets his face smashed in by one of the other robots. All sorts of little robot bits and bobs. We did some pieces that didn't make the final cut of her cutting into herself and removing her tracking device. There was stuff for Jack at the end when he gets stabbed in the head with the corkscrew. Spoilers, sorry for anyone that hasn't seen it. What else was there? We did a lot for weird little like things that were to help the VFX department. So like we built a partial iris head that we had a practical light inside of that we could do all these things with, which they then used as a plate over for the VFX elements. Which is always, it's nice when even the VFX stuff has a practical portion to it. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't the biggest prosthetic film on earth. That's why we really didn't have many days on set.
Well, we didn't. Like, we had a guy there. We had Phil Hara.
Yeah, but Phil was only 2 weeks, and that was all for the burn stuff.
Wait a bit of time on, like, this isn't a 3-month shoot.
No,
it's probably only
it was an 8-month shoot. Yeah. Thanks to the strikes. Yeah,
I know. So we've spoken with a couple of costume designers, and they talk about how they have to have multiples whenever there is like a lot of blood or fluids or whatever. Do you have to make multiples? Because those heads in the back is really intricate.
I mean, it depends on what the gag is doing. If it's being absolutely destroyed, then yeah, we need multiples. Like, if we do an exploding head, then yeah, we need 3 or 4 of them because there's no resetting that. Or if we're actively chopping something off.
But all right, but for instance, like, so her hand is all burnt, covered. Well, those are prosthetic transfers. So we, probably took a week to run them all, but we ran. I know they filled up. I think we at least ran 20 sets. Yeah. So yes, and like we have to make multiples of that because once you take it off,
it's garbage.
It's garbage.
Yeah,
there are certain things that are reusable, certain things that you can keep, shoot again. But like any makeup that we're usually putting on an actor, once you take it off, you're using a glue remover. Everything's ruined.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we might build one fake head for a project, and that's just walked around and shot everywhere. You might only need one of those.
But yeah, prosthetics are
like prosthetics. It's a one and done.
I was just gonna ask about prosthetics because I've played around with like prosthetics and things like that before. And I know there's a bunch of like YouTube tutorials and many different like products people recommend, but how do you guys approach creating a prosthetic, if you don't mind being technical?
I mean, we start with our life cast in an ideal situation. You're getting a copy of the actor's face, which we don't always get.
But no, like we had Sophie come here.
Yeah. Sophie came to the shop.
We might even
we did her
snap of her face.
It was funny because she had just done a Star Wars series where she had also done a robotic left arm. So she was like, "Oh, this again." So it was already old hat to her. But yeah, then life cast turned into sculptures turned into molds turned into appliances and props.
So you always start with some type of casting. You're definitely doing a sculpture, and then you got to mold that. So, and whatever you're producing your pieces in, again, you might only be a one-time thing. You only got to run one, but usually on a movie you're running multiple.
Yeah.
And you can't just run one. So you always need the backup, and maybe you need a backup to the backup because they didn't, you put it on that day and they didn't shoot it. That happens all the time too.
That does happen all the time. No matter how well something is scheduled, there is always real-world hiccups that delay production schedules. Even the best laid plans.
I think in our first half of Companion before the strikes, we had crazy hurricanes up here.
Yeah, no, that was
and that like shut down. Like they lost the road.
Hurricanes
to work.
Not blizzards. It was like too late in the year for blizzards, but there were flooding. That's what it was.
Yeah, it was a hurricane that flooded the whole area.
That was no fault of the production and the producers because they were all amazing. That was a difficult shoot just to get from A to B, like just to
Like
get
on
it
paper,
finished.
that was supposed to be a very easy shoot.
Yeah, but it got hit with so many problems that were completely out of its control.
Because they definitely had to shut down because of road block.
Yeah, I remember that.
And Caitlin says she's played around, but shameless plug, she's a really good self-taught artist for SFX.
That's
She's
awesome.
casted my full hit twice, and she's done
It
some
hasn't always worked out, but
I mean, he's still sitting
play
there.
around.
But
Yeah.
that's where it all
Yeah,
starts.
he has all.
That's where it all starts. I mean, I think, anyone that in the film business, we're all maybe artists that wanted a real job because you're not only going to get recognized in art if you're dead. So like we wanted, still be creative and still do that kind of thing, but get to make something we all get to watch. So that's where you start. You start reading. I mean, I'm older, so I started reading books and magazines, and that's where it is now. It's all on the internet. But I'm one of those guys. We're all a little bit of a hoarder or collectors. So it's like all those old magazines and books that I read when I was a kid. As soon as I made money, I bought them all over again.
And all our earliest test makeup, our books were just filled with the same couple faces of people, our friends, our girlfriends, just whoever would sit still long enough in a chair for us to glue stuff to them.
So that's where it all starts. Is like you have to have that drive, and like I'll say this, even for fun, my job is still my hobby.
Yeah, same. We still always have a sculpture or something going on that's for us, not for production. That was one of the upsides of the strike. There, because there weren't a whole lot of them, but being able to, enjoy our personal art for a little while, and we all just kind of did that online. It was like just posting, well, there's no movies to work on right now, so here's what I've been making.
Yeah, I didn't make bread.
That's awesome. You guys mentioned Smile, and we actually interviewed Sasha Grossman for that movie as well. So I'd love to talk about what you guys did, what your experience was working on Smile.
I mean, Sasha and I have now done 5 movies, 3 of which have featured some kind of scary mommy-based monster. She's wonderful to work with. She handled all of Sky's looks, which were like remarkable in their own right. Just the vast number of things that she and Valerie put together, all those just dozens and dozens of different glam looks were amazing. We had a lot more to do for this one than we did for the first one, which was a much smaller film and only had maybe half a dozen big moments. This one, it was considerably more, much bigger film, a known hit at this point. So yeah, we had a lot of fun things to do for the second film. And it started, we didn't get the script till after the strike, and they were dead set on a January start date. So we had very little prep time, relatively speaking, about a month between our green light and actually being on set. So a lot of things were still being built while we were shooting, and the shop was still open while, me and Jared Baylog were up on set. Brian was here running the shop and getting things built. Yeah, pretty much down to the line. Like I think the last gag we had going was on the last day of shooting and was finished a couple days prior. So we built pretty much through the entire pre-pro and production schedule on that one.
And much like Companion, we did the prosthetic makeup effects.
Yes.
You'll see a giant monster at the end. That was not us. They had Alec Gillis built that. We were on set for that to help puppeteer.
Yeah, Alec was very wonderful and gracious and invited us to be on his team while that was here. So always a blast to collaborate with, a makeup effects legend.
But it's that type of thing where we did the easier term, we did the gore makeup, even though it was more than just gore. But we did anything with the blood and on-set makeup. And then, again, you would provide things that also, like, Sky had tons of wounds or tattoos or anything like that. We would hand that off. We would make all that and then hand it off to the makeup department. So this time, and the first movie we had, it was just smaller scale. We did the same thing on the first, just on a much smaller scale because the movie wasn't as big. This time, it was nice to work on the sequel and to get triple the amount of stuff to do.
Yeah, Brenton Parker is a very imaginative, very creative guy, and he knows what he wants, which is always very helpful. So from our first conversations on this one, he had a very good headset and came in again with some artwork on what we were doing, from the Lewis thing, from the guy that smashed his face with the weight plate to open the film, to just even some of the smaller things like you know he had this vision in his head of this really long nasty piece of glass coming out of her foot at one point. So all these things found their way in, and then he kept adding more as we were going. I managed to get my own little cameo in there in one of the gory moments in the film, because a week before production started, he was like, "Hey, I've just had this bit. Can we get this in?" And I was like, "Let's see what we can do." And I was like, "Does it matter who it is?" He was like, "Absolutely not." And I was like, "Okay, it's going to be me." And he was like, "Great."
I love that. We also spoke with Alexis, the costume designer for that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have to
Also
have a
did
lot of
incredible.
communication with costume designers?
Not yes. In for a movie like this, we have to have a bunch, but specifically because so many of the gags worked in tangent with some of the more elaborate costumes. Like she has that bit at the end where she's opening up the very intricate
Yeah.
costume, and then she's first revealing a scar and then tearing her skin open to get into the monster sequence. Again, spoilers. Sorry, the movie's been out since October, so um, but yeah, so all those things have to be done in tandem to find a way. Okay, well, we've got a makeup effect, a monster effect, a regular makeup, and all these things have to be functional along with these very elaborate stage costumes. So yeah, a lot of meetings, a lot of prep, and a lot of just everyone working together to make it all work for the final look.
But we've also worked where, I mean, listen, there's also been plenty of movies where we walked on and they only have one outfit. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes that's a budgetary reason, and sometimes that's just because it took forever to make that costume. Also, it doesn't matter because whatever the director tells you to do, you're usually doing.
You got to do it. Yeah.
And so if he wants blood all over that outfit, we all have to figure it out. Like and not that happened on Smile at all. Like they were very well planned, but it can work in all different ways. We could have tons of meetings, but hey, like we did a show where they spent, I mean, on shoes, but I couldn't even,
an unfathomable amount
of money on just a pair of shoes. So that you barely, you saw, but and when we heard that amount, it was like, oh, we can't get this and we can't get that, but you can buy that. Oh my god, So yeah, like it all depends on the scene. It all, on a show like Smile 2 specifically, like costumes are a huge thing because that's part of the character.
Of who the character was. Yeah. So Alexis, I think, was one of the first people working on that movie. In fact, like when we came on, like she and Parker had already been going back and forth on costume ideas for quite a while.
I wonder, kind of going back to Companion, what do you think was the most challenging or rewarding thing you accomplished on that particular
I don't
shoot?
think that one had any significant, like, how the hell are we going to pull this off challenges. It was all, within the realm of, we know what we're doing just from reading the script. But it was rewarding to say, it was a small film. It was Drew's first movie, and to see it as like highly praised and received as it was, and to just, get to say, hey, we had a little part of that. Like, that's always rewarding, just when a movie is legitimately good, and you don't have to be like, well, I enjoyed my experience. But like, no, when every part of it came together, despite how difficult it was getting there.
He's more positive. I'm Mr. Negativity. I'm like grumpy old man. But that would be the only thing I would say is, like, we probably would have done more time on set in the original schedule.
Sure.
So like we would have got dirtier, which would have been maybe a little more fun for us.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think we're both happy that the movie, is being seen. Because again, it was on paper like a smaller film, a film that we know we could kind of the run of the mill of what we do. That was kind of like I'm not going to say an easy because no movie is easy, but it was an easier movie for us to build for.
Yeah. There was no, like I said, there were no major challenges to the point of, well, we've got to reinvent the wheel here. Like everything was pretty cut and dry based on,
But that's also based on budget. Like, we knew the movie we were walking into. They knew that they couldn't, they could afford that hand for the shots that they needed, the robot, but like they also knew we need you guys to deliver this, so we're used to that. Like that's a little bit of a smaller movie in the world, like in movie world.
Yeah.
Like budget wise. So we were very comfortable in that world. And that's sort of the world we thrive in. and it was nice to see that movie get a lot of love.
Mhm.
And then also that would be the only negative. Like we wish we could have been there.
Yeah, we didn't get to be on set as much as we usually like to be because of what happened with the strikes and scheduling after they were over.
I mean, we were also stay busy on other projects, so it's not like we lost out on anything. But that's
We can only be in
Right.
one or two places at once.
What is a message or piece of advice that you would give to someone that wants to pursue SFX as like a career?
I mean, that's a difficult question these days. Everyone should follow that passion, but they have to embrace the new reality of the industry in the same way in the early 90s you had to go in looking at what kind of impact CG and the visual effects boom was going to have. There isn't, well, we've been having a second golden era of practical effects for the last decade. It's slowing down a bit. AI is a legitimate and real concern for the visual effects and makeup effects industries. Um, and a lot of producers just don't want to go practical anymore. They don't want to have to pull a trigger and make a choice rather than saying, well, we'll just take care of it in post. So you have a lot of directors out there that really want to carry on that traditional path, which is wonderful. So they still want to see everything that's been going. They want to see amazing sculptures. They want to see amazing drawings. They want to see a well-rounded artist that knows all these things and isn't just coming out with a bucket of blood and saying, I got this and that's what I do. Like, so any young artist should be really well-rounded. Anatomy is key. Sculpting is key. Like, but at the same time, learn how to sculpt with clay, but also learn how to sculpt on the computer. Like take advantage of all the technological resources that are becoming the norm. Like we're dinosaurs. Like we're screwed with that stuff. We have to hire younger, smarter people. But like,
I also recommend just do it. Like,
Yeah.
here's the thing: just go out there and do it. Now, here's the thing: when it gets rough, if you're going to give up, then you're not going to make it in the film world.
That's true.
Like you're going to get stepped on in the beginning,
and later, and decades into your
you
career,
know, you're going to have slow times. You're going to have all like it never goes away. It's you got like it. We're in the circus. You got to love what you do because it's still a job. So sometimes you hate going to work, even though you love what you do.
Yeah, you have to love it. Like I was on set at 5:30 recently and didn't leave until after 9 o'clock at night, 5:30 in the morning. Like you have to love it if you're gonna spend. And I was still the first to go. There was half the team still there for hours after me.
But it's going to throw obstacles, and that's the other thing now. Just the way the movies are made now. If you don't give up, you can have a career. If you're gonna give, like that's the thing. You gotta like know what you're made of because I have plenty of friends that make twice the amount of money I have 3 times the bigger houses. I still got a cooler job.
Yep.
And it is a good job now. I'm not like knocking any of that, but it is like there was a couple years there that you're like, oh my gosh, this is like, oh, I should be doing more. Especially the older you get. But if you're young and hungry, do it. Do it. Like don't say no.
And
say
do it
yes.
now because it is changing. And like
and be creative. Just have fun with it. But also if you need some of that real life stability, it might not be the greatest job in the world. Like that's the other thing. You have to be
you have to be willing to accept highs and lows. You might only have, one big movie in the year and you got to make that carry you through, or you got to be willing to do smaller things that maybe you didn't want to do and work on a Sunday here and there, things like that. Like, we have had really, really amazing years and then really amazing decade and then just kind of be like, oh, there's no next thing all of a sudden. What's going on? And like, that's just the reality of the film industry for everyone from the tippy top to the bottom of it. Like you can go from the top of the world to all of a sudden, oh, wait, do you remember my name? Like overnight.
And it sounds weird. Like you got to get paid, but you also got to have the passion for this. Like it's because again, it's film. So you can't have, you almost need the ego, but you also have to watch because your ego is going to get bruised.
Yes,
like
very much.
Like everyone's, you'll have a director tell you, like, I don't like this design. Yep. You'll have somebody else. You'll have actors. You know how many times an actor sits down with us and they they respect us and everything, but they're like, I hate what you do because I get messy or I look ugly when I sit in your chair.
Because I have to come in 4 hours early and leave 2 hours late. Yeah.
But they appreciate it for the help for the character and all. But yeah, like some people will be like, I hate your job. I hate blood. Like it's sticky. I hate blood. It's a
daily part of our life, and I hate music.
You just gotta keep going. You want to you just gotta stick with it, no matter how low it can get at times.
Yep.
Thank you.
So we started our podcast doing movie reviews. So we want to continue the tradition by asking everyone we interview, what is your favorite movie and why?
Oh, no. That's too spontaneous a question. All right, go to him first while I take a minute to think.
Are we really going to do like favorites?
Like
you
can't pigeon. There's everything.
Give multiple.
For a reason.
All right, you got the Blues Brothers, Taxi Driver, or Goodfellas. I mean, it's anything from Scorsese. Even The Last Waltz is like an incredible movie. Boogie Nights, Way of the Gun, unheard of classic. I can go on for hours.
I'm just going to I'm going to go with the two that made me want to do this, which is Ghostbusters and Return of the Jedi. I'll consider those my favorite because they had everything in them that I wanted to do, and they were entertaining films. And to my little 4 and 5-year-old brain, they blew my mind. And they had made-for-TV specials on how they did it all. So that kicked off my inspiration.
Evil Dead 2 is the greatest movie ever made. 87 minutes, and it never stops from beginning to end.
But yeah, I mean, we could answer that question for a whole other podcast. Favorite horror movie, the first Elm Street film, like that. I was watching that wildly inappropriately at 8 years old. Like, yeah.
That's what we're saying. Like, I love movies. And I don't just like genre movies. I love all kind of movies. As long as it's a good movie, it's a good movie.
Love it. Is there anything that you are working on now that you can tell us about?
No,
we have a very great movie that we are not allowed to mention. Cannot wait till we can. It's one of the biggest films we've ever tackled. No, it is the biggest film we've ever tackled in this shop. Just nonstop from start of the movie to the end of the movie. And I, really, really excited to get going. But no, we cannot mention what it is yet.
They haven't even mentioned.
That's okay.
So you wouldn't even know what it is because it hasn't even been written about.
Yeah, we could say a title and it would be meaningless.
But we can say this, like you guys have checked out Companion, you saw Smile 2. Recently, we just did the latest season of Goosebumps with David Schwimmer on.
That was a lot of fun.
So yeah, we always have a lot of stuff coming up. It just seems maybe we hit that next plateau where now we can't talk about it.
We have a smaller series coming out with Mitch Films. That'll be a fun one. With just a bunch of little monsters in it. But that is, the one we're very excited about. We look forward to being able to talk about.
Definitely, we'll make sure to have you back for this great secret movie. Where can people follow your work? Where can people find you and your Instagram handles or website?
No more websites. They stopped being in vogue, so very sadly made the choice after 20 years to discontinue it, and everything is Instagram now until that pendulum swings back. So I'm Jay Selenfriend on Instagram, or you can search up Monster in My Closet, which is the name of my shop.
And I'm Brian Spears at Brian Spears Effects on Instagram, just like Brittany. So that's how you spell it.
They're cousins.
Well, thank you so much.
This is so much fun. It was great getting to meet both of you. I definitely can't wait to see what else.
I need to know, in order for me to share this video when it does release, what are 2 of your movies?
He's going to judge you hard, so think for a second.
No, I know my one. Listen, I have my one down. It's Pan's Labyrinth.
That's a good one. That's a good choice. That's a solid choice for a lot of reasons.
Now, number 2 is a little bit, I don't know number 2. There's a few.
Mine's embarrassing.
A lot of pressure.
My favorite movie that I've said for years is The Phantom of the Opera. I think it was the 2004 with Emmy Rossum and Gerard Butler.
Okay, it's a great show.
I'm also a Princess Diaries diehard. That's
no shame there. I mean, a little bit, but it's a venerable franchise. I understand. There's a new one coming, right? That'll be a
Apparently,
very
but
exciting
we've
day
always
for you.
All right, I'll share.
And then we have a special place in our heart for Babylon.
yes, Babylon
Okay.
is our favorite as a couple. Mhm.
Well, there's this one thing that we do to close out the episodes, and is we say "end cut" and clap our hands as if it was a clapperboard at the same time. And we've been
Damn
asking
it,
our
I had a
guests.
clapperboard too. I don't have it handy to grab, but yeah.
But if you will do us the honor of just bidding farewell the episode and clapping us out.
Sure. And cut.